Kakadosh Boker Tov, Masechet Moed Katan Daf Yutet Amud Aleph 19A1. We're just going to start though on 18B. Yutchet Amubet Mishnah, 3 lines from the bottom. It says, En kotvin shtare chov b'moed. You're not allowed to write a shtar chov during the moed. Remember that a shtar chov is because basically since you can write it after the moed, so you're not allowed to write it on the moed. Shtar chov is a document which records debts. So for example, if I wanted to borrow money from someone, so what they would do is they would write a document. Listen, this person borrowed a certain amount of money and so on and so forth. Obviously, there's without interest unless it's with a goy or with a heter iska that would permit someone to charge interest. But if not, you're not allowed to make any type of a document. So it says you're not allowed to write any type of shtar chov and moed. But what happens if you don't believe the guy? Which means that you're going to say, listen, if I'm not going to write it now, the guy's going to take off. How am I going to lend him money? So then he says, right, or even if he does believe it, but it's a sofer, and the sofer has nothing what to eat, which means that if you're not going to start paying the sofer now for something, you're not going to have anything what to eat. Yeah? So he says, what happens? So he says, you're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to write it. Yeah, you're allowed to write the shtar chov. Okay, why? Because now it becomes, whether it's because it becomes a something which is going to become a loss, a necessity, because you're either going to lose because now you're not going to lend him the money, or the sofer needs it for the money. Okay? Fine. Next. En kotvin sefarim tefillin umezuzot b'moed. You're not allowed to write any type of sifre Torah, tefillin, or mezuzot in the moed. Okay, so you don't write anything. Okay? Ve'en magino tachat. We're also not going to do hagah. Remember, hagah means you don't start coming and looking it over to make sure whether it's correct or not. Afilu b'sefer Ezra, even in the sefer Torah of Ezra, has sofer, which means this is obviously a very precise, meticulous sefer Torah. Rabbi Yehuda says no. A person can write for himself, right? That's what it means, latzmo. Okay, because basically that he says that obviously you're not allowed to write it to sell it to other people, right? But for yourself, you're allowed to write, right? Sefer Torah, tefillin. Actually, it doesn't say Sefer Torah. He just says tefillin mezuzot latzmo. Okay, it doesn't mention about the Sefer Torah. Okay, very good. Also, you're allowed to start weaving, I think the word is in English, to make a tzitzit for yourself also as well. Okay, so let's see the Gemara. So the Gemara says as follows. Tanu Rabbanan, we learned on a Braita. Kotev adam tefillin mezuzot le'atzmo, ve'toveh al yirecho techelet letzitzito. So a person is allowed to write tefillin mezuzot for himself, and he's going to be toveh al yirecho, right? I don't know why it's dafka. I guess that's the way that they used to weave on their thigh. Okay, so I guess that's why it was done that way. So there used to be toveh al yirecho letzitzito, right? Tzitzit. Vela'acherim, and for other people, right? That's what it says over here. Vela'acherim, and for other people, it says over here betovah. What does it mean betovah? Betovah means that you're doing a favor, but not as the business, exactly, not as the wage. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says ma'arim. What does it mean ma'arim? Ma'arim is milashon ha'arama. What does it mean ha'arama? What you do is you sell your own tefillin first, and then afterwards you write new tefillin for yourself. You understand? Because again, to write for yourself was permitted. To write to sell was prohibited. So what do? You sell your own tefillin, which that there was no isul because you didn't write anything. You're just selling your own tefillin, and then you write for yourself new tefillin. So that's called ha'arama.
You sell them during Chol Moed?
Yeah, you're allowed to sell tefillin in Chol Moed. There's no problem selling, right? Do you go to the store to buy things in Chol Moed?
You actually give them yours, or you give them
no, yours, mamash yours. So then you can't do the harama. The harama was that you're selling euros. Anyway, you're the one that wrote your first one as well, right? So you're the one that wrote your first tefillin as well. Okay. So therefore, what? You're very much the 21st century. Remember that. And nowadays everything has to be new. In the olden days, you understand, everything was old. Right? Even clothing, everything was secondhand. There's no such thing as you understand. Rabbi Yosef says, Kotev u'mocher kedarko. You're allowed to sell right? To write and to sell normally, even without harama. Why? Until you have enough money for parnasa for the simchat chag. Meaning you needed a certain amount of money in order to have money for simchat chag. You're allowed to come and to sell and to do everything that you want, and there's no problem. Ori le Rav Chanan. So Rav taught to Rav Chanan. The Amni and Sabbath say there was Rabbi Barachana taught to Rav Chanan. Halacha is you're allowed to write and sell normally as long as what you need for the necessity of Chol HaMoed. Okay, next. Tovei al Yerecho. So we just said.
He says Parnasato. He doesn't say Parnasato.
Right? We just said that you're allowed to weave the tzitzit, the tchelet for your tzitzit. Tanabana, we learned in the Braita. Tovei Adam al Yerecho techelet letzitzito, aval lo be'eved. A person is allowed to come and he's allowed to weave on his yerech, right? The chutet tzitzit is on his thigh. He's allowed to come and weave the tchelet for tzitzit, but he cannot use it with a stone, which means with the help of a stone, which means he cannot tie, right, the stone to at the top of the chut in order that it's going to be stretched out. That's the way that they used to do it. Okay, that means they used to basically put it so it's stretched out. Now that it's stretched out, when you're going to be tying, it's much better, right? In order, it's going to be a much better quality. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, right? Sorry, these are the words of Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Chachamim omenim chachamim say, up Evan, you're allowed to do it also with an Evan, but not with a pelech. What is the pelech? It says over here, right? See, it says Vinkom bepelech. It says over here. This is we're going to see. Okay, the Chachamim say that you need like a shinui, a small shinui, right? A smaller shinui than that which Rabbi Eliezer says. Okay. Now let's see what it says over here. Rabbi Yehuda says Bishmo in his name. Be'even avelo bepelech, the same thing. So Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer that you're allowed to do it with an evan, right? Not like what we just said before in the name of Rabbi Eliezer that you're not allowed to. The Chachamim say ben be'evan ben pelech, which means like this. According to Shitat Rabbi Yehuda, he went one level lower in leniency. Meaning, according to what we learned in the Braita, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it was Tovei Adam Lirecho, yes, right, not be'evan. And Chachamim say be'evan velo be'pelech. According to Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, be'evan was permitted. Not like we just said before, that evan was not permitted. Evan was permitted, not with a pelech. And Chachamim say everything is permitted. Okay, that's the difference, right, between them. They wanted to permit it because it's going to be tzorech mitzvah. Okay. Let's see here. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. It says of Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. V'chen Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So too Rabbi Chia bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Halacha. What is halacha? Ben me'even ben me'pelech. Right. Basically, it's like Chachamim in Rabbi Yehuda. Right, which means, okay. So it says over here, what does that mean? It says you're allowed to come and you're allowed to do it whether with a stone or with this spindle, you called it?
Yeah.
Spindle. Okay, memepelech. Valacha is also, kotev kedarko, right? You're allowed to write the tefillin kedarko, umocher kedeh parnasato, and also like the Shita Rabbi Yosef, which means you're allowed to write tefillin normally and sell it according to what you need for the parnasa. Next Mishnah, Yutet Amud Aleph. Hakover meto shosha yamim kodem laregel. If somebody's going to bury their deceased 3 days before the regel, batla hemenu gezerat shiva. So now there's no shiva. Why? Because the regel cuts off the shiva. Shmona yamim, if it was 8 days before the regel, batla hemenu gezerat shloshim. So now it's going to be batel the shloshim. Because remember, we already finished the shiva. Shiva is 7 days. It's the 8th day. So since it was already 1 day into the shloshim, it cuts off the shloshim. There's going to be a whole question. Why exactly does it say 3 days, even if it's 1 day? It's going to be sha'achat lifnei regel. The regel already is going to cut it off. Why does it say specifically, right? Shlosha yamim lifnei regel. Okay, we'll see that, I think, in the Gemara. So now it says, Mideh shamru, because the rabbi said, right? Shabbat ole ben Masechet. Shabbat counts for the minyan, but it does not do a pasek. You heard there's no pasek. There's no afsek. It means it doesn't interrupt it. It just counts it. So for example, you have 7 days. Right? So therefore, if Shabbat is during the 7 days, that Shabbat is counted as one of the 7 days. Right? You have 30 days. The Shabbat is there. Shabbat is counted as one of the 30 days. But it does not make... Exactly. That means even though you're manning it to Shabbat and everything, but it's not a pasek. It's not stop it completely. Why? Because there's obviously Dvarim Shebetzina that you are noheg. And therefore, since there's Dvarim Shebetzina that you do things which are in private, which you are going to do be noheg, so therefore you would do it. Regalim mafsikim. Regalim are the exact opposite. Regalim, they're mafsik and they're mevatel the gzera of whether it's the shiva, right, or the shloshim, right, or whatever it is. Ve'eno ole, but it does not count as a minyan of the shiva in a case where it's not going to be mitbatel al yidei regel, right? Which means that, for example, let's say somebody passed away on regel, first day of Sukkot. So now after Sukkot, they have to do 7 days. Why? Because the regel does not count as one of the days. It's a mafsik. It makes a pasek if you started beforehand, but it does not count if it's not going to be mevatel, it doesn't count as one of the days. Shabbat counts as one of the days, but it does not mafsik.
So if the person is Khalila v'chas lo aleinu,
Sorry, say the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer says, Mishecharav bet hamikdash, once the bet hamikdash was destroyed, atzeret is like Shabbat, which means Shavuot. We just had regalim. Regalim usually shalosh regalim. Shalosh regalim tachog li b'shana. What is that? Chag HaMatzot, Chag HaSukkot, Chag HaShavuot. He says no. Once the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed and now there's no korbanot, Chag HaShavuot is going to be like Shabbat. What does it mean? It's going to be like Shabbat. That it's going to be oleh, but it's not mafsik. Why? Because once there's no tashlumim le korbanot hachag, right, for the 6 days after the Shavuot, so therefore Chag HaShavuot is only going to be for 1 day. So since it's only going to be Shavuot, right, for 1 day, right, so he comes and he says, right, so therefore it's going to be oleh. Okay, so he says, Rabban Gamliel says, Rosh Hashanah v'Yom HaKippurim. When we're talking about Rosh Hashanah and Yom HaKippurim, karegalim. It's going to be like regalim. What does it mean going to be like regalim? Rosh Hashanah and Kippur is like a regel. So therefore it's going to be mafsik and not oleh. Okay, and Kol Sheken then, atzeret. But if Rosh Hashanah, how many days is Rosh Hashanah? 2, according to everybody. It's never going to be more than 2. And still, so if it's going to tell me that Rosh or Kippur, how many days is it? 1 day. So if Kippur and Rosh Hashanah is going to be like a regel, Kal v'chomer then Shavuot is going to be like a regel. The Chachamim say, not like this, not like that. What does that mean? Not like one opinion, not like another opinion, but rather it's like the regalim, and Rosh Hashanah and Kippur is going to be like Shabbat. Okay, and let's see what.
So what is halacha l'maaseh then? This is confusing.
Amar Rav, says Rav. You want Moshe? Says the Gemara. Amar Rav, says Rav. Gezerat shloshim batlu, aval yamim lo batlu. What does that mean? We just said in the Mishnah that if the regel was chal after the avelut, right? If they already started the shloshim, so batla menu gezerat shloshim. So the gezerah of the shloshim was already batel through the regel, but the yamim were not batlim. What does that mean? They're not batel, right? Which means that for certain halachot they're not going to be annulled. We're going to see what does that mean. The chena maravuna gezerat batlu, the gezerat shloshim is batlu, yamim lo batlu. Rav Sheshet Amar afilo yamim lami batlu. Everything was batel. So now let's explain what are we talking about exactly. So my tama, what is the case exactly that Rav and Ravuna are talking about? Yamim lo batlu, that the days are not batel. So it says she'im lo gileach erev haregel, asur legaleach achar regel. If a person did not take a haircut before the regel, so he's not allowed to take a haircut after the regel until they have the 30 days from the Yom HaKvura. Why? Because since it was already batla gezerat shloshim, he had to take a haircut erev haregel, lichvod haregel. And the fact that he didn't do it, so now they made a knas that what? That now he has 30 days, right? He has to wait the 30 days until after the regel. Okay? Until here makes sense? Okay. Yutet Moed 19b. So says the Gemara, Tanya, we learned in a Braita, if a person is going to bury his deceased 3 days before the regel, now it's going to be batel gezerat shiva. If it's going to be 8 days before the regel, it's going to be batel from him the gezerat shloshim. Umegaleach erev haregel, he's going to take a haircut erev haregel. Vim lo gileach erev haregel, if he did not take a haircut erev haregel, asur legaleach achar haregel, he's going to take a haircut. He's not allowed to take a haircut after the regel. Abba Shaul Omer, Abba Shaul says, mutar legaleach achar haregel. You're allowed to take a haircut after the regel. Why? Just like 3 days of avelut is going to be mevatel the shiva days, the 7 days of the avelut. So to the mitzvah shiva is going to be mevatel the gezerat shloshim. And therefore, even if you did not take a haircut at a regel, immediately afterwards, you're allowed to come and you're allowed to take a haircut immediately afterwards. So says the Gemara, Shiva, are you telling me that it's only going to be 7 days? We just learned in this Braita והתניא, right, הקוברת מתות 6 ימים קודם לרגל, בטל ממנו גזירת 7. 8 ימים קודם לרגל וכו' וכו' וכו'. Now he says over here like this, what are you telling me that it's only going to be 7 days? We learned מפורש in the Mishnah, regel is מבטל גזירת 7 only if it's going to be 8 days from the kavura. So says the Gemara, Kasav Rabba Shaul mitzat hayom kekulo, this is how we paskin. V'yom hashvi'i ole lo lekan u'lekan, which means this. We paskin that mitzat hayom kekulo. What is mitzat hayom kekulo? When you pay attention, when a person is in avelut, they only do 7 days, but it's not a full 7 days. On the 7th day in the morning, miyad achrei shachrit, boom, he gets out of avelut. Why? Mitzat hayom kekulo. It counts the whole day. So a little bit into the day is already the full day. Now he wants to say like this. So now it comes out, the 7th day is actually for both. The 7th day counts for the 7, plus it counts for the shloshim. So because of that, he says you don't need 8 days, because 8th day means that you went already into 8th day. No, even 7 days. Why? Once it came mitzat hayom lekulo, so therefore the 7th day came, he finished avelut. But not only did he finish avelut, now he already started and he's into the shloshim. So because of that, the 7th day is olelu lekan ulekan, also for the 7 days and also for the shloshim. So Amar Rav Chasta, Amar Ravina Bar Shila, halacha k'Abba Shaul. Says Ravina Bar Shila, the halacha like Abba Shaul. Umodim chachamim l'Abba Shaul, and the chachamim are going to be modim l'Abba Shaul. Keshechal shmini shelo liyo b'Shabbat. Only if the shmini, the 8th day, comes out on erev on Shabbat, which is erev regel. Shemutar legaleach b'erev Shabbat. That it's going to be mutar on erev. That means basically like this. They usually argue and they say they cannot do it until it's going to be the 8th day. That means they do agree mitzvah yom kikulo, but they don't agree that it's olelo lekan lekan. But if it does happen that it's going to be that the shmini is going to come out on Shabbat erev regel, so then you could do it on the Shavi'i, which is erev Shabbat. Only in that case. So says the Gemara, who does this go like that? Which Rav Amram says the name of Ram. Avel kevan she'amdu amnachamim me'atzlo mutar b'rechitza. On the 7th day, the second of the menachamim, they got up from giving him consolement. Now he's allowed to go and take a shower. So Keman says the Gemara, Kebashul, which says like Bashul. Bashul says mitzat yom kikulo. A little bit of the day is part of the day. So Amar Abaye says halacha is like the Bashul, right? Biyom hashvi. Umodim chachamim l'Bashul biyom shloshim damim mitzat yom kikulo. Also that the chachamim agreed to a Bashul on the shloshim as well, that it's also mitzat yom kikulo. Okay? Rava says halacha k'Abba Shaul is to do the shloshim, but the halacha is not like Abba Shaul to do the shiva. That means they wanted right now to make a differentiation. On the shiva, we don't say mitzat yom kikulo. That's what he wants to say. It means halacha is not like Abba Shaul, but on the shloshim, yes. Unardai amra no halacha k'Abba Shaul bezo bezo. In both, halacha is like Abba Shaul. Which means the halacha is always like the mekel in dinei avelut. Meaning to do a dinei avelut, we always go like the lenient opinion. So since Abba Shaul is lenient, so therefore we're going to go like Abba Shaul in both cases, also in the shiva and also in the shoshim. Mitzat yom kikulo, a little bit of the day is part of the considered the entire day, and there's no problem. Shloshim yom minalan, says the Gemara. How do we know the concept of shloshim? The question is, where's the concept of shloshim? So he says like this: Shloshim yom minalan. And how do we know the concept of shloshim? Yalif pera min nazir. We're going to learn pera from the nazir. What does it mean? Zera shava. It's written by Moshe and Aharon and Banav that they're not supposed to do avelut by the death of Nadav Avihu. Okay, so it says Rashechem al Tifrau. What does it mean Rashechem al Tifrau? When the 2 children of Aaron, they died on Chanukat HaMizbeach in Parashat Shmini over there, so Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded to tell, right, Aaron and Banav and Notarim, the rest of the brothers, that they cannot do avelut, right, in order to not to be me'arvev the simcha v'akadosh baruch Hu and their avelut. So because of that, from the fact that it was written that Aaron and Banav, they were not allowed to cut their hairs, and they were not allowed to tear their clothing. That's why it says Rashechem al Tifrau v'idichem lo tifromu, which means they're not allowed to cut their hair, and they're not allowed to they're not allowed basically to let their hair long, and they're not allowed to tear their clothing. So we learn from there that other avelim, they have to do the exact opposite. Okay, so now what is pera exactly? It's 30 days. How do we know the pera is 30 days? They learned that from the nazir. Because it says over there, pera, which pera by Roshechem al Tifrau, pera, and gadel pera se'ar rosho. Pera to do with the nazir is 30 days. Ma'alehalan, just like stam nazirut is 30 yom, so too avelut is going to be 30 days. So that's how they learn it. Right, also. So how do we learn this? Which means, how do we know that by nazir, there we learned it in the Megillah and Masechet Megillah to do with the embens, if you remember, to do with the exactly, pera. Okay, so he says, how do we know over there by the nazir that it's 30 days. Amar Rav Matana says in Rav Matana, Stam Nezirut Shoshim Yom. Stam Nezirut is always going to be 30 days. My Tama, what's the reasoning? The Merkava says in Pasuk, Kadosh Yeh. What is Yeh? Begamatariya Talatin Havu. This is Yeh is a Gematariya of 30, which means how do you know that the numerical value of Yeh is Shoshim, it's 30. So therefore, that's how we know that a Stam Nezirut is going to be 30 days. Okay? Amar Rav Huna ben Yeshua says Rav Huna ben Yeshua, the son of Yeshua, Hakol Modin, everyone agrees, Keshechal Shlishi Shelo Liot Erev Regel. When the third day comes out on Erev HaRegel, which means even though the regel is going to be Vatel Gizrat Shiv'ah, Asur Berechitza Erev. You're not allowed to take, a person is not allowed to come and take a shower until Mamash Knisat Yom Tov. Amar Rav Nechemia ben Yeshua says Ben Nechemia ben Yeshua, Ashkechitinu le Rav Papi, Rav Papa. We found Rav Papi and Rav Papa. The Yatvi becoming they were saying like Rav Huna ben Yeshua, which means even if you're going to tell me that a person is going to be Mbatel, it's only Mamash Samuch le Knisat Achad. It's not Mamash Al Boker. That means even if we're going to say that the regel is mevatel, the regel is mevatel, samuch la regel, no mamash, meaning not in the morning at a regel they can come and start, taking showers. And, no. It's samuch la knisat regel. Ikadami, there are those that say. Amram Nechemia b'der of Yosef, Ashkechinu Rav Papi, Rav Papa, Rav Huna b'der of Yeshua, Diatve Kamni, they were all three of them saying, Hakol modim sheim chal shishit shiloliyot erev regel shasu b'chitzad ha'erev. You're not allowed to take any type of shower until the nighttime. So ba mine Abaye merabba comes Abaye niyatzum rabba kivarob baregel. What happens if a person buried on the regel itself? Regel olelo limyan shoshim or en regel olelo limyan shoshim. We just said that the regel is not ole, but it's mafsik. But it's not ole. It's not ole, but it's mafsik. But here it was already on the regel, so it's not going to be mafsik, and it's not going to be ole. No. This is on the regel atzmo. But regel atzmo. Right? Regel olelo minyan shoshim. Right. So that means if it's going to be the regel olelo minyan shoshim, which means that it should be right until the shoshim from Yom Kivura, or it's not. Okay. So says the Gemara leminyan shiva lo kamibaili. We already learned it. But to do the shiva, we just said no. The lo naga mitzvah shiva beregel, but there's no shiva beregel, which means since there was not going to be any type of the shiva during the regel, so therefore obviously it's not going to olelo minyan shiva because he has to wait until after the regel and then he's going to start the shiva. Kikamibaili. When is the question? Why? The Kanahaga mitzvah shloshim regel, because there is something of shloshim in the regel. He's not allowed to take haircuts. He's not allowed to write. He's not allowed to start being megayet. So there are certain aspects of the avelut of the shloshim that he is doing.
He did already.
So what is halacha? What? He didn't do the shiva. The person passed away on the regel and they buried him on the regel. Remember that here, right? We do not bury on Yom Tov at all, right? But in other places in the world, right? In Yerushalayim they do, Gibraltar they do. They bury on Yom Tov. Usually they would bury on the second day. Technically, you would be able to bury even on the first day, because you're allowed to bury the first day of Yom Tov, right? Al yidei amamim, right? Which means al yidei goyim. Second day of Yom Tov, al yidei Yehudim, through Jews you bury. So therefore, what happens is they actually bury on Yom Tov. So here the question is, okay, fine, they buried on Yom Tov. Now they don't start the Shiva until after Yom Tov. What about the Shoshim? Can they do the Shoshim from that day of the burial or not? Why? The Shiva, it still didn't start because they didn't start any aspects of the Shiva. So therefore, okay, they have to start after the Regel, they start the Shiva. But the Shoshim, they do have some aspects of the Shoshim that is the start. They're not allowed to take haircuts, so therefore the part of the Shoshim, it started already. So do you say that it's going to count or not? Says the Gemara, Malay, he says, En ole, it doesn't start, it doesn't count. Okay, which means that they start everything after the Regel. So they're going to start the Shiva plus the Shoshim after the Regel.
But how the Chag just
it just continues, and that's
so
it. Just
we don't
continues.
have.
There's the Gemara 8. Now we're going to ask the following question: if somebody is going to bury their deceased, right, 2 days before the regel, he's going to do 5 days after the regel. But since he already did 2 days before, so he only has to do 5 days afterwards. And his melacha in those 5 days can be done to other people. And his servants can do work in his house, right, within his house privately. They're not going to come and they're not going to do any type of, right, any type, one second. So what's the general rule? Kaf Amud Aleph, kol shehu mishum avel, regel mafsiko, v'chol shehu mishum isker rabim, ena regel mafsiko. Because the general rule is anything to do with avelut, the regel is mafsik. But anything which has to do with isker rabim, which is tanchumei avelim, to do with the rabim, the regel is not mafsik, but rather nachamim et avel, the regel itself. And therefore, they don't have to be mashlim after the regel. Meaning, as long as he started beforehand, they don't have to do it afterwards and there's no problem. And then we'll continue tomorrow, to do with the concept of the 3 days before, not 3 days before.